Welcome to your next great novel. I'm your host, Phil Williams, and today I have thriller author Roy Robson on the show. Roy and his brother Gary are co-authors of the London Large series of novels featuring the exploits of Inspector Harry H. Hawkins of New Scotland Yard. The novels are set on the unfashionable back streets of southeast London, where Roy grew up in the 1960s and 70s. Inspector Hawkins is made up entirely of flaws knotted together by good intentions and the clear and uncompromising moral certitude of an old-school southeast Londoner. Roy now lives in Bromley with his wife and two children. Welcome to the show, Roy.
Phil, hi. Well, thanks for inviting me. Great to be here.
Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, how you became an author?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I've been meaning to become an author for years, almost all my life, actually. But it's just taken me a bit of a while to get around to it. I'll tell you a little bit about, actually, if you don't mind, just about my background and then how I moved into writing from that.
Sure.
So, as you said in your introduction, I was born in southeast London in the early 1960s. And my father was what I would describe as a serial entrepreneur, with a penchant for treading the lines between legality and illegality, shall we say. He started up many businesses, including a security company, a pig farm, and his most successful one was a demolition company, where he would knock down houses and clear them ready for new builds. So, as youngsters, we had a great time, playing in pig shit and getting rides in bulldozers with his, and big trucks with his hard working, hard drinking, gambling loving, friends and colleagues.
Your dad sounds like the protagonist in a novel.
Well, this is why I'm giving you this background. We I guess it was a tough area, a staunchly working class area. Illegality was never far away. I mean, we had an Uncle Jimmy who we didn't know even existed until we were well into our teens, because he'd been in prison for, 20 or 25 years for robbing banks, apparently. So kind of into that sort of, I guess that's the world from which we emerged.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but 60s and 70s London is a pretty gritty place.
Yeah, a very gritty place. I mean, probably in our youth, so my brother and I, who I write the books with, we spent most of our youth days, going down pubs down a place called the Old Kent Road. There was one road where there used to be 32 pubs, and mostly on a Friday and Saturday night, half of them would end in a pub brawl. So that was the kind of place that we came from. Our mother, who was kind of maybe a bit more refined, maybe a bit more middle class, shall we say, than our father, was really bookish. So she would always buy books, she'd read us books, and she made sure that we got sent off to a grammar school, which is like, maybe for an American audience, it's like a
private school.
It's a state school, but it tries to mimic the ethos of a private fee-paying school. So we were subject to a much more academic education than people from our background would normally be subject to. So to sort of get to the answer to your question, I'll give you that background. But when it came to, sitting down and with my brother and deciding to write a series of novels, we was like, okay, what would be the inspiration, if you like, for a character? So, we went to that background, and so, like you just said, it was all of those people and those times that we knew in those days. So really, Harry Hawkins is a fusion or a synthesis of all of those characters. But we didn't just want to write him as a nostalgic look back to the past. So, so he's written really as a character. The reason we really like to write about a character like this, who's a hard drinking, old school character, is he can also help to sort of throw light on the present. So within the book, and for the books to work, we needed a partner for him who was kind of his opposite.
Right.
So then we developed this idea of his partner. His name is Amisha Banushali. She's a second generation Indian immigrant who's like his opposite, obviously culturally in gender terms, but also,
She's
whereas he,
tech savvy, right?
oh yeah, really tech savvy. I mean, she's got an IT degree from Cambridge. She's like everything he's not. She's posh, she's poised, and so no, they're not in conflict. Obviously, they work together, but the sort of relationship between them forms a lot of the fulcrums, the centre of the London Large universe. It's a really good way of exploring themes of the past, but themes of his type of personality and how he fits with the modern world. So all of that obviously within the themes of what we call our fast-paced, gritty, hard-boiled, what we like to say perhaps is in the genre of Brit grit or Brit noir.
I could see Harry Hawkins clashing with the PC world that we live in today.
Yeah, well, he just doesn't understand the PC world, but let alone
Right.
clash with it. And obviously Amisha is fully aware of it. So, sometimes within our novels, he might display attitudes that wouldn't be favoured on today, and there's a lot of drama and confusion in those. I think that kind of gives the book a bit of an extra edge, as well as being what we hope are good, entertaining stories. We have all this kind of social backdrop running in, throughout all of the books.
I would imagine you have a fertile imagination for characters, given all the people that you've known over the years. I imagine you have a lot of, hey, this character reminds me of that guy
Yeah.
situations.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can. There was so many fantastic characters that used to work with my dad. I can remember one. Roy Purse, his name was. Took us on a drive while we were on school holidays. We wound up on a dog track, and I thought, oh, because our dad used to take us to the dogs. Did you have like greyhound racing much in America? So like the greyhound racing.
Yeah, we have
And
dog races, although that wasn't something I went to as a
yeah,
kid.
well, we used to go there, but one day we turned up in the afternoon when I was on school holiday with him, and before the racing started, and I just saw him exchange money with the dog handlers and then be allowed into the dog pens where he fed the dogs. He came out. I was probably only 10 or 11 at this time. And I said, why are we here? What was that all about? He simply said, oh, just moving the odds ever so slightly in our favour for tonight.
give
So,
give them a McDonald's lunch, make them a little bit
yeah,
slower.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. I think they just used to slow the favourite down. That was all.
Yeah. So your latest book is London Large. It's the fifth in the series, Way Past Evil. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, yeah. This is our first venture into a book where we have a serial killer. Actually, all of our books, the way we work them is we set a theme, and then we build a story around a theme. So, like for instance, Bloody Liberties was about hybrid war and was much a political thriller as anything. American Lockdown was about the nature of a character. So we go and research people who had been in prison, like under extreme duress, like Churchill, Patty Hearst, and people like that. And for this one, we decided to try the serial killer. So we researched serial killing and found out as much about it as we could, because we really wanted to write this book because we'd previously written a short story where Harry Hawkins, who's I don't know if I've mentioned yet, is kind of generally known as H to his friends and his enemies alike. And anyway, we wrote this story to give him some a back where his life was falling apart. It was at the time of his divorce. He was being estranged from his children, and at the same time, a case was going on that was where he was tracking down a serial killer. But it's one of those cases that sticks in the person's mind because he didn't solve it. So now here we are, 15 years later, and he discovers that the serial killer from 15 years has become active again. So it's not just like there's a nasty, evil person on the loose. It's also throws him back to memories and to a time in his life that was just disastrous. So it kind of that little bit of backstory we hope adds a bit of flavour to this one.
Right. And sounds like H has his own personal demons to deal with
I just
on top of.
Yeah. H has a lot. He has a lot of demons to deal with. Yeah, yeah. As well as facing the changing world that he can't master. In a way, he's the classic, man out of time.
Right.
The oldest gunslinger in town.
The fish
You
out
know,
of water.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The world's moving beyond him, and his methods, no really longer apply in the modern world. Yet somehow, he seems to battle through and get results. Especially now he's got Misha to help him. So.
As a reader, I think most people, myself included, I think most people enjoy the fish out of water story, where the main character is, that's the essence of story, anyways, is where
Yeah,
you put the protagonist in the most uncomfortable situation possible, the thing that particular person would be bothered by the most, and then see how they do. But
mm.
I don't know what it is innately in people that we gravitate to those stories, but those stories I think connect with people.
Yeah, they do. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, they're in a way they're kind of archetypal. The
Yep.
archetypal character who's in the wrong place at the wrong time, but somehow manages to find his way home.
Fantastic. Now, did you bring a particular excerpt that you wanted to read?
Yeah. So I have an excerpt here. So
Great.
it's it's from Way Past Evil, which is the latest book,
Okay.
and it's when Harry first discovers that the killer who's on the loose, and at this point actually he's no longer working for the police, he's become a private detective, but he discovers that the killer that's on the loose is the same one that he was tracking down 15 years ago, and it's his kind of post-discovery reaction.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Yep.
H grabbed a bottle of wine from the table and left the room without another word. He went through the kitchen into the garden, closed the door behind him, and sat on the concrete steps leading down to the small patio. He didn't know what he was doing or why. All he knew was that he needed to sit, alone, and ride out the anguish and nausea that was spiralling up inside him. He sat and drank and gritted his teeth and resisted the temptation to cry. His mind reeled and flashed with images it was impossible to sort into any kind of order. He saw the mangled bodies of young women, his small children crying, broken whiskey bottles and bloodied hands, Julie screaming at him, the mass ranks of vicious journalists scaling at him at press conference, bodies on mortuary slabs, flashing blue lights and dark patches of maroon-tinted earth. All of a sudden, it was 2003, the worst year of his life. His whole being, mind, stomach, vital organs, muscles, skin, sweat glands, tear ducts, the lot, recalled the pain and catapulted him back into it. The pain of personal loss and the breaking of a family, the pain of facing, time and again, scenes and situations of almost unbearable horror, the pain of being taken to the very limits of his capacity to function, the pain becoming a thing in itself, tearing at him, wearing him down, making his life a living hell, day after day. It's not a copycat. The Gavin Hill guy is the original caller. He's back. The sick, evil bastard was back. It was official. There was no arguing with the DNA guys. The killer who had evaded him all those years ago was back. The evil was back. The pain was back. And Harry Hawkins was back, deep, deep inside it all, with nowhere to run and nowhere left to hide. End of excerpt.
Hey, that was fantastic. That was great. I could envision your voice being Harry Hawkins, no doubt. Like I couldn't read that. If I read that, it would being an American it doesn't sound right.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I could
yeah.
definitely envision, the Londoner. That was good. That was fantastic. Now, is there something specific about that clip that's personally significant to you? I mean, beyond we've already talked about, your history.
Yeah, I think it's significant because I think in many ways Harry is really significant to us. When I say us, I mean me and my brother, who my co-writer,
Yep.
because he is such a fusion of everything we knew and everything we were, and of course there's also it's hard to write anything without putting some bit of autobiography in. So I think because he's become so dear to us. When something like this happens to him, and kind of breaks him down like this, it's personal to us as well. So
Yeah, absolutely. So, Way Past Evil. Excellent.
yeah,
You've had some very good success with London Large. In fact, I've had a couple of readers tell me because I send out emails to my people. A lot of times
yeah,
I'll recommend just books that I've enjoyed and read. And then a lot of times I ask people, hey, if there's anything that you've liked, let me know. Blah blah blah. I've had a couple readers email me back and say that I like Roy and Gary Robson and I like the London Large series. That's
Oh,
happened.
terrific.
That's
Well,
happened
that's
a couple
fantastic.
times. So,
Yeah.
what do you think has been your biggest challenge? I hate to say failure, but maybe your biggest challenge as an author.
I would say the biggest challenge for me has been to actually start writing. After we went through schooling and everything, because my mum always got us into this grammar school that I spoke about. We kind of went off into careers that really were a result of that. So I guess in many ways it was kind of my mum's vision for our future rather than my father's, who pretty much wanted us to leave school when we were in shorts and go and earn money, that won out. So like now my brother works as the professor of social sciences at the University of Krakow in Poland, and I spent most of my career working for large financial institutions in the City of London, programming for reinsurance companies and stocks and shares trading companies. But all the time I was doing it, I wanted to write books. And so, but you have mortgages to pay and children to bring up and stuff. So I just didn't get around to do it until maybe, well, when did the London Large books? 3-4 years ago. So it took me an awful long time to start. And I think in the end, because I kept saying to my wife for years, I actually feel for decades, I'm going to write some books, I'm going to write some novels. And in the end, she just said to me, Roy, just do it. Just leave work and do it. And so I did. So just getting there, really. That was my biggest challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a different world now than it was, say, 10 years ago, where if somebody wants to write a book, there's no gatekeeper stopping people anymore,
No.
which I guess is a double-edged sword in some ways. I was talking to Brett Battles. I don't know if you're probably familiar with him. I was
Yeah.
talking to him a couple of weeks ago, and he was telling me that when he started, because he was traditionally published, and then he moved to indie, and he said when he started as an indie in 2012, it was easier to get exposure and readers than it is today, even though we have probably better tools to do what we want to do, but the market has become much more saturated, much more crowded,
Yeah.
I think, for sure.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's one thing writing them, but the next thing, of course, is selling them, or as you
Right. Yeah,
say,
that's true.
getting noticed. So as an indie author, you have to pretty much mix your time up there with writing the books, which is the thing you want to do, and marketing, which I don't mind doing, but isn't the thing I set out to do. But there's no point in writing them unless you have an audience to read them, really. So you have to put the effort in, and as you say, it's a very, very competitive market, but the tools are there, and if you work at it hard and keep going, then you can find a readership.
Absolutely. Now, the first book that you wrote, was it the short stories, or was it the book one?
No, book one. So I
Okay.
think it went something like book 1, 2, 3, then the short stories, then book 4, book 5, and we're now working on book 6.
How long did it take from the time that you started book one? Because I know that usually the first book takes a lot longer than once you sort of get rolling.
Yeah,
How long did it take when you said, "Hey, I'm going to write this novel," to the point where it was out there and being purchased?
just over a year, I would say.
Okay, that's not too
Yeah,
bad.
just over a year. I'm going to go back to your previous question as well, if you don't mind, Phil,
Sure.
about what's your greatest challenge. I had a second greatest challenge, which if there are any would-be writers or anyone who's thinking of doing this for a living, it might be some good advice, which is I just pushed it out a bit too quickly.
Right.
I didn't get it, properly and professionally edited, the first book, and so when it first came out, it got a lot of, negative feedback for those reasons. So then, obviously, we had to go back and redo it, and we've polished it up now. But those reviews are out there for all time. So I probably wish I would have taken another couple of months and maybe added add an extra time for some professional copy editing.
Right. I'm always shocked by when I send a manuscript that I'm finished with, that I think I'm done all I can do with it, and send it to my editor. I'm always shocked
Yeah.
at what comes back. I always think, I'm like, this one, there's not going to be that many mistakes, and it always comes back in there. So there's a lot
Yeah.
of mistakes.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
It's like we're
I
blind to our
think.
own mistakes, I think.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Yeah. it's probably impossible to get rid of every mistake in 90 or 100,000 words.
Absolutely.
But you shouldn't take too long because perfection can be the enemy of action. But
Yeah.
you should take long enough to make sure that most of the errors are cleared up.
Right. How would you say that you're different from the million other authors on Amazon? I don't know exactly how many, but I know that I think there's like 6 million books on Amazon, and I think
Wow.
another 70,000 I think goes up almost every day.
Well, like you say, it's different. It's difficult to be different amongst so many people. I would say two things actually. I mean, one is that I think we have a history and a background that really suits us to writing the kind of books that we're writing. As you say, Harry could almost be us, although we're not violent people when he has to do violence from time to time, because that's the nature of the book. But I think like we have a real feel for the dialogue and how the people we were writing about would speak and what they would say. I mean, one of the things
Setting.
and the setting, yeah, yeah. Well, I guess they say write what you know. So in that sense, that the whole setting and history and culture of where we come from, I think is what we've written about. Maybe secondly is the fact that we do write as brothers. I don't know if there are many people out there
I don't know
writing
anybody
as
doing that.
brothers. And I'll be honest, how we've not killed each other in the last 3 or 4 years, I have no idea. Pretty much the way we work is we disappear into a room for maybe someone's houses. But because Gary lives in Poland, it's not always easy to do. But I'll go over there or he comes over here, and we just hide ourselves away for maybe 3 or 4 days, and we flesh out a theme and a plot, and argue and almost come to blows on occasions. But at the end of it, we have an outline of a book. So that's how we work, and name that might be quite unusual, and I think it works well because sometimes we push each other on the good on about we push out bad ideas, we hope, and argue, and the good ideas get through. So
I could see that as being useful. I mean,
yeah,
my wife is that for me, I think, because
yeah.
I read her my first draft material. So she has to suffer through that, but she'll be the first to kind of raise an eyebrow and say that I don't agree with that, or that doesn't seem real to me, or whatever. Which makes me mad, of course. And
Yeah,
then I think
yeah,
about it like 20 minutes later after arguing with her and realize that
yeah,
she was probably right, and then I fix it. So I
yeah,
think I've gotten
absolutely.
better at just fixing stuff instead of
Yeah,
arguing
yeah,
about it now.
yeah. Well, yeah. It's really good because we have to write the book separately as well. It's really good to really go to a kind of fairly detailed level. At the end of 3 or 4 days, we might come out with every chapter, what's going to be in the chapter. How characters are going to feel in the chapter, and we could get to a point where we can then write different bits of the book, apart.
So,
So
will you guys actually swap chapters? How does that work when you actually start with the first draft material after
So,
the
well,
outline?
now what we do is we write our own chapters basically.
Okay.
So if we defined, I don't know, 50 chapters in the book, and we would have written about all of them and the plot and what would happen in them all. You could almost, the way we've done it, you could almost write any of them out of sequence. But of course, when you start, things change and you have different
Right.
ideas.
Right.
But basically, I'll go away and write my chapters, Gary will write his, then we'll edit each other's and make sure we're in sync as we go through writing the book. So, that works pretty well for us. And as far as I'm aware, and I've challenged people and friends to this, is nobody, with the possible exception of our sister, can tell who's written what chapter. So,
I didn't notice any of it from what I was reading.
yeah,
I've read. I didn't. I couldn't tell. I couldn't tell.
yeah.
That is amazing. Down the road, if you ever start a new series, I wonder if it would be cool to have an every other different narrator, essentially like a two main. You could do a protagonist and an antagonist. My last few books have been 4 points of view, where it goes. There's four main characters: one, two, three, four, and then five, six, seven. So it goes in like an even order, which is very difficult for plotting, but
Yeah,
it's kind of interesting to get that different voice and see the different points of view. But
yeah.
but I was thinking having two different, literally different people writing the two chapters, that could be really interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. We are thinking now about another series. We've got two or three ideas, so it's definitely worth throwing that one into the mix. That could work very well, actually.
You guys would be set up perfect for something like that. About my brother's actually, he wants to write a book. And I
Mm.
think he's naturally a better writer than me, but job and family and mortgage and everything else. But that's something that I had thought about approaching him at some point, maybe when he's retired, to co-write something. But I think it's really interesting to write with a brother.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of co-writers out there, but I don't know if there are any brother co-writers. I mean, I know people like James Patterson just puts out an outline, and he has several ghostwriters who writes his books. I guess that's a different kind of thing. So,
Yeah, yeah. I used to really like Patterson, and
mm,
the ghost written stuff isn't as good, in
mm.
my opinion. I mean, obviously his paycheck tells me otherwise, but
Yeah. Well,
but
there's no other way you'd be able to put out 5 or 6 books a year, is there?
right, right, absolutely. There's an authenticity in your books that really separates them. One thing that I don't like about a lot of books that I read is that a lot of them appear to be amalgamations of everything that author read throughout their life.
Yeah.
Versus, I can usually tell when I'm reading something that's really authentic that, hey, this author probably has been down that road somewhere somehow. Like they maybe they lived in that area, maybe they've experienced similar things to the character, maybe they have a friend that's experienced similar things to the character. But when you read something really authentic, it's definitely a different feeling than when you're reading something that is an amalgamation of every thriller book that they've ever read.
Yeah. I would like to think that for us, it is authentic, and but in terms of the setting and the language and everything about them, really. So, I'll leave it to other people to judge, but certainly
Absolutely.
that's our ambition.
Absolutely. What would you say is the most controversial book that you've ever written, and why?
Our books have caused some controversy for a couple of reasons. I wouldn't say any particular one is more controversial than the other. We
Okay.
don't set out to create controversy. We just set out to write what we feel is a good book. But I mean, there's a lot of industrial language in our books, and we've been picked up on that by quite a lot of people who say, "Oh, why do you need this?
Right.
It's not, you don't, you could write a great book without it." But when we started writing it, we had this debate amongst ourselves, and we decided, the way the people talk in our books is the way they talk in real life,
Right.
certainly in the areas we came from. So we stuck with it, and it's caused us, a lot of grief, shall we say.
Right.
And also, sometimes because some people don't get that sometimes characters in books are characters, and they have ways of behaving and perspectives on the world, and so sometimes H's whole personality upsets people because he won't bow to the politically correct strictures of the day, and that's got us in a bit of hot water. Not a lot, but people have commented on and said things like, "Oh, he's not a very nice guy. He doesn't want to go to his diversity workshop." I said, "Well, that's who he is. That's his character.
Right.
If you don't like it, don't read it. So
Right. Yeah. I think being true, and I'm the same way. I write all the colorful language that if I have a character that would never use a swear word, then they're
mm,
not going to use a swear. If that particular characterization would be one that they're prim and proper and they wouldn't use that language, then they're not going to. But
mm,
then if I have another character that's what they would say the F word in every third sentence, then that's what's going to happen.
yeah,
And sometimes it gets a bit exaggerated in that a lot of times you're putting these characters in situations where they're agitated more often than a normal person would be, and they're
absolutely.
so sometimes the language gets maybe more than
Mm.
what would happen normally.
Absolutely. So yeah, in terms of controversy, that's our controversy, I guess. And anyway, that's as you say, that's a decision we made, and one we stuck to. I don't
Yeah,
know whether that means we sell more or less books.
right,
I think possibly, in all of the thrillers out there, probably most of them don't use as much swearing as we do.
Right.
So that may restrict our potential readership a bit, but you know.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I really think that I want to write something that is is true to life and as authentic as I can write it. And I got a bad review. This was, I don't know, it was a while ago, but I caught some flack because I have a book where there's a one of the one of the main antagonists is an overweight woman, and in the descriptions was not pulling any punches, and
Mm.
so in a couple of the reviews they were saying about how I must like hate overweight people and this and that.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's just, I really don't worry about that stuff. I'm not trying to be offensive. I just in the books there is no politically correct for me. It's just, I'm gonna call it as I see it, and if
Yeah.
people get upset and they're offended, then read something else.
Well, exactly. I mean, to try and stop some of the bad reviews for people who don't like some of the stuff, we have added a trigger warning to our blurb.
That's
You know,
smart.
so
Yeah.
the proprietor says, if you're easily offended, don't read the books.
Yeah.
So people have the choice because, as far as we're concerned, obviously it's literature and it's exaggerated, but they're real characters with real attitudes. There's people with different attitudes and whatnot, but they're all attitudes that exist out in the world. And if you can't write about things that exist out in the world, then what's the point of writing?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I've done the same thing. Now, at the bottom of the description, I'll put, adult language and content, blah blah
Yeah,
blah.
yeah,
But it doesn't eliminate all of them, but I think it does help.
no. Yeah, absolutely.
So, like most authors, I'm assuming that you do a lot of reading. What types of genres and authors do you like to read?
So I like to read a lot, as much as I can. I like to read a lot of history books,
Okay.
biographies, historical characters like maybe Stalin and Napoleon, or in fact, the most recent biography I read was of a guy called Martin Johnson, who you might not know in America, but he was the captain of the England rugby team that won the World Cup some years back. He's like, I thought I found him a really fascinating guy. I also, we write for a list, so I try to read as many as I can. I don't always have the time. I've just read The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, which I thought was a terrific book. I
Okay.
love that Scandinavian noir stuff, so I intend to read a bit more of that.
So it
And the
sounds like you
part,
read some nonfiction. I write nonfiction and fiction. Now, granted, I write a lot more
yeah,
fiction, but I find myself reading just as much nonfiction
yeah,
as fiction. Do you think that reading the nonfiction and getting these real world ideas helps with your fiction?
absolutely, yeah, definitely. I mean, I also read maybe a little bit of, philosophy, and I found that all that stuff, really helps to actually underpin a novel. Sometimes, you might have some kind of, I don't know, maybe a discussion in a novel of, the good guy and the bad guy, and a bit of text about good versus evil type stuff. But, sometimes you can reference back to that to sort of more maybe philosophical works and turn that into kind of street language. So I kind of quite like to do that. Yeah.
If you could recommend a book, I know this is an impossible task. There's so many good books, but if you said if we're dealing with probably a mostly thriller type audience, is there a particular thriller novel that you might recommend to people to read that you enjoyed?
Yeah, I'm going to recommend a book that I read years ago, and really, in many ways, is the book that got me, and my brother as well would say the same, interested in thrillers. And it's a book called Get Carter by Ted Lewis. I don't know, it's been turned into a film three or four
Yeah, I
times.
think I did see the movie.
Yeah,
It's been a
which one?
while though.
I
Is
mean,
that I
there,
remember the title Get Carter.
yeah.
I don't. It's been a long time since I've seen that movie.
Yeah, so that movie's been made three or four times.
Okay,
There's the
so good.
classic, great, brilliant film starring Michael Caine, who actually was born and bred in the same area we grew up in, just around the
Okay.
corner from us. That's probably one of my favourite films as well as being one of my favourite books. I mean, it's in the 1970s, but it's a kind of book that every 10 or 15 years kind of gets rediscovered by another generation. So, I mean, to us, Ted Lewis is kind of like almost the godfather of Brit noir.
So
You know,
what's the
his
basic plot of Get Carter?
well, the basic plot is it's a archetypal revenge vigilante
Okay.
justice thriller. So the basic plot is Carter's brother gets murdered in northern England, and he's the kind of gangster who's come south, and he goes back up to find who did it and to avenge the murder. But it's a very well crafted book and a terrific film. The other films, there was a very unfortunate remake made with Sylvester Stallone and Mickey O'Rourke, I think, which I couldn't even sit through.
Sure, I did not see the British version. I'm sure I saw the
Uh-huh.
horrible American
Okay.
version.
Yeah. Skip that.
Yeah,
If you've
right.
got the time, go back and watch the Michael Caine version from the
Okay.
1970s. I mean, it's a bit dated and hasn't got the cinematography that you would expect today, but it's still a terrific film, and it's kind of, I think it's one of those films, one of those books that kind of was very influential, you know, even though within the book genre, even though many people might not have heard of the author. So we have a blog where we write about, you know, our research for our books and the films and books that have inspired us. So we've got an article on our blog there, on our London Lives blog, about Get Carter as well.
Oh,
So
fantastic.
so you know, if you're a thriller fan and you want to look at something that really set the tone for hard-boiled, gritty thrillers, that's my recommendation.
Thank you, Roy. Hey, thank you so much for coming on the show. Where can
It's been a
people
pleasure.
find out about you and your books?
So we have a website which is called londonlives.com. On that, there's a tab for getting in touch with us, or they could email me directly at robsonroy00@gmail.com. We have the blog at londonlives.com/blog, and it's available from the website anyway. We have a Facebook page. If you go on Facebook and key in London Large, I think that's it. I don't think we've got much more social media stuff going on at the moment. So.
Excellent. So if you want a authentic London hard-boiled thriller series, this is can't get any better than London Large.
That's just correct.
Thank you, Roy.
Phil, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me, and I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Your Next Great Novel. Be sure to subscribe. You can find the podcast at philwbooks.com and on iTunes, Stitcher, or TuneIn.